It started with an email. A Tuesday mid-afternoon. The sun hung low behind the brittle branches outside the office window, casting long shadows across the carpet. I had just reheated some leftover soup in the break room and settled back at my desk, half listening to the muffled buzz of the office chatter. My inbox pinged. I clicked out of instinct, expecting a memo from the regional manager or another invoice to process. But instead, it was from my daughter. My name is Marjorie Reynolds, but most people call me Margie. I'm 52 years old, a marketing coordinator at a mid-sized tech company in Portsmouth, New Hampshire. Widow. Mother of 2 grown kids. Hannah, 27, and Nate, 24. I've spent the better part of my adult life trying to make sure those 2 never had to feel the weight I carried through my own childhood. So when I saw Hannah's name in the sender line, I smiled a little, thinking maybe she was writing to say she could finally make it home for my upcoming 53rd birthday. We hadn't spoken in a week. Work had her traveling again. I opened the message. FYI, I won't be at your 53rd birthday party. My work can't give me the weekend off, sorry. You'll get the video link. Woman tipping hand. That was it. No, I wish I could be there. No, I'm sorry, Mom. Just a fact, a video link, and a smug little emoji at the end that made my chest tighten. I read it twice, then a third time. The cursor blinked at the bottom, waiting for my reply, as if this conversation were as casual as canceling a dentist appointment. The lump in my throat swelled, but I didn't cry. I couldn't. It wasn't sadness. Not quite yet. It was something colder. Something dull and heavy, like the moment before a storm when the sky turns gray and still. I closed the email, opened a blank reply, and typed the only words I could manage without shaking. Understood. Wishing you well. 4 words. That was all I gave her. And it felt like a small act of defiance, a quiet protest in a lifetime of swallowing my feelings. I sat at my desk a while longer, staring at the faint reflection of myself in the monitor. A middle-aged woman with tired eyes, graying hair pulled into a bun, and a cardigan that had seen too many winters. Behind that reflection, a ghost of a younger me flickered. The Margie who used to bake cupcakes for Hannah's school fundraisers, who sold her wedding ring to help cover Nate's tuition deposit, who went 12 years without buying herself a new coat because the kids always needed something first. When their father died, James, my husband, it was like someone had ripped the ground out from under us. Hannah was 14. Nate was just turning 11. I was 39, scared and numb, and working part-time at a bookstore. I had no idea how I would keep the lights on, let alone keep 2 kids afloat. But I did. I went back to school at night, took the first job I could find, then the second, and worked my way into marketing because it paid the bills and kept the pantry stocked. For years, I told myself the sacrifices were worth it. Every dollar saved, every hour worked, every birthday I skipped celebrating because someone needed a new laptop or a plane ticket or a moving truck. It was all worth it. Because they were my kids. And that's what love does, right? But now, sitting there with that email still burning behind my eyes, I felt something unravel. Like a thread I hadn't noticed before was finally pulled loose. At home that night, I didn't bring it up. I didn't call Hannah. I didn't mention it to Nate, who had stopped by to borrow my printer and barely asked how my day was. I made a cup of chamomile tea, sat in the living room with the TV on low, and stared at the birthday invitation I had spent 2 hours designing and printing on thick, cream-colored cardstock. I had mailed them out with care, thinking, hoping that this year, maybe we could all be in one place again. A silly hope. I didn't throw it away. I just tucked it into the drawer next to the phone charger. Out of sight, but not gone. Just like every little slight I had forgiven, every apology I had never received, every time I had told myself, next time will be different. But now I wasn't so sure. The next morning, I woke up before my alarm and stared at the ceiling. The air was still and cold. Something had shifted. I couldn't name it yet, but it felt like the ground beneath my life, my role, my expectations, my sense of who I was, had tilted just slightly off center. It wasn't about the birthday. Not really. It was about everything that came before it. The way being a mother had become synonymous with being invisible. And for the first time in a long time, I wasn't sure I wanted to keep disappearing. I didn't tell anyone I had stopped answering Hannah's texts. There weren't many anyway. Just one the following afternoon. A single line. Hope you're not upset. Can't control my schedule, LOL. Another LOL. As if everything were a joke, or worse, beneath seriousness. I stared at my phone, thumb hovering over the keyboard, then turned it off. I needed silence. Not just from her, but from everything. It was Wednesday evening, and for the first time in years, I didn't rush home to start dinner, check in on Nate's schedule, or respond to family group chats about birthdays or Amazon wish lists. Instead, I took a longer route home, winding along the coast, the Atlantic wind cutting across the windshield in cold, briny gusts. I didn't cry. I still couldn't. But I felt like I was standing on a sandbar that had always seemed solid until the tide began to shift. That night, I sat alone at the kitchen table, sipping chamomile tea and watching the steam swirl upward. The silence was almost too much. So I called the one person who might not brush me off, Joel, my boss. Joel wasn't just my supervisor. He was also a friend in the quiet, unspoken way older colleagues sometimes become. Someone who had once stayed late with me when I missed a deadline, who brought donuts when he knew I'd pulled an all-nighter helping Hannah with a job application. When he answered the phone, his voice was warm, steady. Hey, Margie, you all right? That question, that simple, loaded question, nearly split me in half. I paused, fingers tightening around my mug. Then I said, my daughter isn't coming to my birthday. She sent me a video link and laughed about it. He didn't speak for a moment. Then he sighed. That hurts. I'm sorry. It was the first sincere acknowledgement I'd received. No minimizing. No excuses. Just someone who understood that disappointment, when it comes from your own child, slices deep. I don't think she realizes, I murmured, how much I gave up. How much of myself I just stopped being for their sake. Joel didn't rush in with a pep talk. He just listened. Then, gently, he said, you're allowed to draw a line. You're allowed to ask for more. The words hung in the air long after we said goodbye. The next day, I moved differently. I didn't jump up when Nate texted about needing a ride to a mechanic. I didn't offer to pick up groceries for Hannah's cat sitter. I just didn't. And the world didn't collapse. That evening, I was folding laundry when Nate showed up unannounced. He didn't even knock, just let himself in like always. I heard the door creak and his voice call out from the hallway. Hey, Mom. I didn't answer right away. I finished folding a towel before walking into the living room. He stood there holding a to-go cup of coffee. Brought your favorite. Vanilla oat. I raised an eyebrow, taking it slowly. Thanks. He hesitated. So, Hannah said you were kinda cold about the birthday thing. She's freaking out. Freaking out. I repeated, eyebrows raised. Well, yeah. She thinks you're punishing her. I took a sip of the coffee, trying to keep my voice even. I said nothing cruel. I just said, understood. Wishing you well. Yeah, but he shifted. She was expecting you to be. I didn't know, more understanding. That word. Understanding. I set the coffee down. Nate, I've spent my life being understanding. When your dad died, when we couldn't afford braces, when Hannah dropped out of her first grad program, when you missed rent, I understood. Every single time. His face flushed. That's not fair. No, I said calmly. What's not fair is being treated like I'm a convenience store. Open late. Always available. No thanks required. Nate stood there, stunned. Maybe for the first time, seeing me not as Mom the fixer, but Margie the person. Then he said it soft but cutting. I think you're making this about you. I stared at him, heart pounding, but I didn't yell. I didn't defend. I just said, it is about me. That's what no one seems to understand. The silence that followed was thick. You should go, I added softly. We can talk another time. He didn't argue. He just left the coffee on the table and walked out, the front door clicking shut behind him. I stood there for a long moment, feeling my pulse slow. My knees shook, but I didn't regret it. For the first time, I had drawn a line in the sand, and I had not stepped back over it. That night, I didn't sleep much, but I felt a strange calm. Like the earth had shifted, and though I wasn't sure where it would lead, I was finally standing on my path. and I wasn't going to apologize for it anymore. The days after Nate's visit moved with an odd clarity, like everything around me had suddenly come into sharper focus. I still went to work, brewed my morning tea, folded laundry, but I didn't feel tethered in the same way. Something had snapped, and now there was space, raw, unfamiliar space, for something else to emerge. It was late November when the letter came. Not from Hannah or Nate. From Ruth, my sister-in-law, James's younger sister. We hadn't spoken in a while, not out of malice, just the drift that happens with time. The envelope was hand-addressed, with that same neat cursive Ruth used to label homemade jam jars. Inside was a short note and a small brass key taped to the bottom. Margie, I meant to give this to you years ago. James asked me to hold on to it, just in case. It opens the old cedar box in the attic. I think it's time. Time stopped. I knew the box Ruth was referring to. James had built it himself the summer before he died. A plain, handmade cedar chest with a brass latch that had always been locked. I'd never pried it open. I just assumed it held old keepsakes or maybe forgotten tools. After James's heart attack, I hadn't had the strength to investigate. I stored it in the far corner of the attic and buried it under a blanket and holiday decorations. That night, I climbed up the attic stairs with a flashlight and the key clutched in my palm. The air was thick with dust and memories. The cedar box sat where it always had, untouched. My fingers trembled as I inserted the key and turned. It clicked open with a reluctant groan. Inside, carefully wrapped in yellowing tissue, were letters. Dozens of them, all addressed to me, all written in James's unmistakable handwriting. Some dated days before his business trip. Some postmarked but never mailed. I sat down on the attic floor and unfolded the top one. My breath caught. Margie, if you're reading this, I'm sorry. It means I didn't make it back. There's so much I meant to say, but most of all, thank you. For loving me. For raising our children. For doing the hard parts when I couldn't. I know I don't say it enough, but I see you. I always have. I pressed my hand to my chest, trying to breathe. The second letter was even more intimate, filled with memories. Our first apartment, the night Hannah was born, the time we both cried when Nate started school. You are the most resilient woman I know. You build safety out of chaos, joy out of thin air. Don't forget yourself, Margie. Promise me you won't forget yourself. I read letter after letter, sitting cross-legged on the attic floor, tears soaking into the cotton of my sweater. Some were playful, some romantic, but all of them carried the same message. Love, gratitude, and the hope that I would never lose myself in being everything for everyone else. But that's exactly what I had done. I stayed there until the sun started bleeding through the cracks in the roof, the light catching the brass latch in a soft golden glow. Something in me shifted again, not broken this time, but blooming, like I had just been handed permission I didn't know I needed. The next day, I called the local community college. I'd seen a flyer weeks ago advertising part-time instructors for weekend creative writing courses. I had always loved writing, had even started a novel once, back when James was alive. But after he died, there had been no room for that part of me. Now I thought maybe. I didn't tell Hannah or Nate. Not yet. I didn't want this new space inside me filled with noise or criticism. This part was just for me. A week later, as I was preparing dinner for myself, a rare treat of seared scallops and asparagus, no microwave meal in sight, Nate called again. Mom, he said, his voice strained. I found something in Dad's old jacket. It's a letter. To you. My heart skipped. I already found them, Nate. The letters. In the attic. He was quiet for a moment. Oh, I didn't know you knew. It just hit me hard, you know. I softened. It hit me too. I think I took you for granted, he admitted awkwardly. Hannah too. We just assumed you'd always do everything. Be okay with everything. I didn't respond right away. There was a tenderness in his voice I hadn't heard in years. But I couldn't go back. Not all the way. I love you, Nate, I said gently. But I need to do things differently now. I get it, he said quietly. I'm sorry. As I hung up the phone, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt real. Seen. And for once, not through the lens of what I could do for others, but for who I was and always had been. I stood by the window, watching the sun fall behind the trees, and I realized something vital. James had seen me, and now, finally, so did I. Winter settled into Portsmouth with a quiet firmness. The days grew shorter, the air carried salt and ice from the nearby coast, and each evening closed in like a sigh. But for the first time in decades, I didn't dread the dark. I had signed the contract with the community college a week after finding the letters. Starting in January, I would teach a weekend course called Stories We Carry, Writing from Life. The irony didn't escape me. I had carried other people's stories on my back for years. Now it was time to unearth my own. Hannah still hadn't called. After Nate's apology, I had expected something. A voicemail, maybe a card. But there was silence. That hurt, more than I wanted to admit. Still, I refused to chase her. I had spent too many years doing that, patching over her coldness with reasons, brushing off her indifference with hopeful rewrites. My birthday came. I had invited just 10 people. No decorations, no streamers, just a small dinner at a quiet bistro on Goat Island with a harbor view and candlelight dancing across the wine glasses. Joel came with a bottle of Rioja. Ruth drove up from Vermont with her husband and the key that had opened so much more than a cedar box. 2 of my coworkers joined us, and 3 of my new students, women my age, looking for meaning just like me. They toasted me with laughter and tears. One of them, an older woman named Delia, leaned in after dessert and said, "You make space for others, but I hope you know how rare it is for someone to finally make space for themselves." Her words landed like truth. I did know. I felt it in my bones. Hannah didn't come. Not that night. Not the next day. But the morning after my birthday, I received a long email from her. It was more than a few lines. It was a wall of text, a jumble of guilt, confusion, and justification. "I don't know why you're being like this. I've had so much pressure at work, and you know I'm not good with emotional stuff. I thought you'd understand. You always have. But lately, you're so distant, like you're punishing me." She didn't say sorry. Not once. Not directly. The closest she got was, "I guess I should have been more thoughtful, but you've always been strong. I just didn't think I needed to worry about you." I read it once, then again, and then I archived it. I didn't reply. Not because I didn't care, but because I finally understood something. Her words weren't meant to repair anything. They were a life raft for herself, not a bridge toward me. It wasn't anger I felt. It was peace. 2 weeks later, I stood at the front of a sunlit classroom with a dry erase marker in hand, facing 12 adult learners eager to write their truths. I asked them the first question I had scribbled into my teaching journal weeks ago. Who are you when no one is asking you to be something else? Some cried. One man laughed. A woman in the back whispered, "I don't know." I smiled. That's where we start. The class became my sanctuary. Every weekend, we wrote about love, loss, survival. I told them in fragments my story about James, the children, the cedar box, the years of being needed more than seen. And in their eyes, I saw something I hadn't expected. Recognition. One evening after class, Delia approached me with a folded paper in hand. She said, "I wrote this last night. It's for you." I opened it. A poem. Simple, raw, perfect. One line caught in my throat. "A mother is not a well that runs dry. She is the spring, too, waiting to remember her own name." I walked home that night with the poem in my pocket and a kind of quiet joy pulsing under my skin. A month later, Hannah called. This time, she didn't lead with excuses. Her voice cracked on the second word. "Hi, Mom." I waited. I read the letter Dad wrote, the one Nate found. And I finally get it. You were never just our mom. You were everything. And we made you feel like nothing. My heart didn't race. It didn't crumble. It simply steadied. "Thank you for saying that," I said. I needed to hear it. Years ago. But I'm glad I'm hearing it now. "Can we start over?" she asked. I didn't promise anything. But I said we can start honestly. That was enough. We met for lunch a few weeks later. There was still distance between us, but also effort. That was new. Real. And maybe that's how healing begins. Not with perfect apologies, but with imperfect people finally showing up. As winter turned to spring, I stopped checking my phone for their messages. I stopped measuring my worth in wire transfers, favors, or Facebook likes. I started planning a solo trip to Nova Scotia, something I had once dreamed about when the kids were little but never dared to do. And I lived, not just for them, not through them, for me, because I am not a well that runs dry. I am a spring. And after all these years, I am finally learning how to flow again, on my own terms in my own name. Thank you so much for listening to my story. Your support means everything. If this story touched you or made you think, please subscribe to our channel for more real, powerful stories.